But staying with this story, last night the South African National Defence Force aided the South African police in their first raid in Jeppestown in Johannesburg. The army is also set to be deployed in KwaZulu-Natal in the wake of xenophobic violence. The question of whether or not the army should be deployed has been widely drawn out amidst fears and concerns. But to talk more about this, SABC reporter Chriselda Lewis joins me now in studio. Chriselda, thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at this. The fact that the army is being deployed, it's really been seen as a last resort, meaning that the police, should the army be deployed, which they have, people have said it will look like the police has lost control of the situation, and government stressing that the army is there to help and assist the police, not to take over. So let's look at this objectively. Help us interpret what it actually means to deploy the Defence Force.
Essentially what it is, and these were really pertinent questions that we posed to the Defence Minister yesterday, Natasha, when she made this announcement, to ask her why is the army being deployed at this stage. Certainly we'd come from a much volatile past couple of weeks, and now that it has really sort of subsided, why have they decided at this point? You would recall that the Defence Minister had mentioned that they thought that the violence itself had sort of gone down, but there had been an incident in Alexandra where a Zimbabwean couple had been shot at and were previously in a critical condition in hospital, but now they've been released, and basically saying that what needs to happen is for South Africa to be seen to be reclaiming the state. The violence that we've seen taking place over the past couple of weeks should not be taking place. The police, of course, we put to them as well, David Mahlobo, the State Security Minister, who is the acting police minister, we put to him whether this intervention at this stage in any way signifies that the police were not able to contain the situation. What they're saying is that the police were there to do their job. They were able to make sure that tensions had ceased, but what needs to happen now is for the army to come in and assist the police with whatever eventuality there might be in any of these areas. That support quite critical, Natasha, in that the police will continue to do their work, and once they're able to gather surveillance that in a particular area it seems like tempers will flare again, the army will then come in support. And clearly this is the case because on the streets of Jeppestown and Alexandra, both areas that I visited today, there's absolutely no army that is visible on the streets, which gives a clear indication that once there seems to be a problem, you will get the police, then we will be in contact with the army to say we need some kind of assistance in a particular area. So that's what it's being interpreted as at the moment, not to take over the role of the police, not that they did not do their jobs. They did as far as they could. They invited, as the Defence Minister said, invited the army to say, come and assist us with what seems to be something that we thought would actually subside. But as a result of what happened, again, that second incident following the killing of Emmanuel Sithole, which police are investigating at this stage still, whether it's criminal or related to xenophobia.
Okay, but then this touches on an interesting issue because this is essentially a civilian issue, and one can then understand the concerns that are raised over deploying the army to deal with civilian issues. And one wonders at the scope of the powers and the privileges of both the army and the police. So are there any checks and balances in point to just make sure that in deploying the army that those checks and balances are looked at and maintained?
That seems to be the assurance that we got from the Defence Minister yesterday. And we wanted to understand what exactly the roles of these two institutions, if I may, would be. In that the police would, of course, continue with their jobs, that support would be given to the police by the army. But of course, some would say this has happened a bit rather too late. Having the army coming in at this stage, at a time when it certainly seems like the violence itself has really gone down. But just coming back to your point, Natasha, in terms of the roles, it's purely on the basis of providing support. There is absolutely no army at this stage. We've been making several calls. I even called the spokesperson for the South African National Defence Force. I said, you said, well, you're going to deploy the army onto the streets. Where are they? You're not going to find them. They're still in the army barracks. If there's the surveillance that is done, and they find that this is potentially going to be another hotspot, or there is a possibility that tempers might flare again, whether it is in Jeppestown, in KwaZulu-Natal, or in Alexandra, then you will certainly see them on the streets. But what we're seeing coming across now, for example, looking at the raid that took place last night, that support is being shown in that the police conducted that raid. The support was provided by the army to ensure that the situation itself is placed under control.
Chriselda, we've run out of time, but very briefly, how has the presence been welcomed amongst the community members?
Well, there seems to be quite unhappiness in Jeppestown this morning about the police presence yesterday. Some claiming that the police had beat them up, did not knock before they barged into their home. So a host of problems at this stage. But, you know...
those are the things that are going to need to be checked.
Absolutely, you know, about how they're actually going to deal with this. It shouldn't be seen to be the army coming to bulldoze their way into the homes of these South Africans or foreign nationals who are living in these hotspot areas. But certainly not very welcomed in terms of the raid yesterday, but they're open to dialogue. Jeppestown as well was swarming with police today.
All right, Chriselda, thank you very much. Chriselda Lewis talking to us there about the deployment of the SANDF in the wake of the xenophobic violence.